Yes. So I believe we have to consent to that. And so the idea is that we will have this recording available and post it on our co-design website for people to access afterwards. All right. It's now my pleasure. I see a few familiar faces. Hello, everyone out there. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today. Louise Christie is the Acting Director of the Scottish Recovery Network, and she's joining us today from Scotland, where it's 3 o'clock and rainy and a bit miserable, but we're delighted that you are here. The Scottish Recovery Network is a nonprofit initiative established in 2004 to promote and support recovery in Scotland. And their work is really rooted in the philosophy of co-production. So looking at the personal experience of recovery at the center of life, practice, and policy in Scotland and beyond. I hope I got that right, Louise.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yes, and we are, she's involved in a number of really exciting initiatives, and we're delighted to have you here today. And I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm just going to put up a PowerPoint, which I haven't used for ages, but I thought would give you something to look at during the presentation. So I'd just like to start off by saying thank you very much to people at McMaster for inviting me to do this. It's very nice to be asked, but also thank all of you for taking an hour or more out of your day to come along, listen to this, and hopefully I also get to hear a lot about what you're doing, because one of the great things about working with Gillian and Sandra and the others at McMaster is I've learned so much about other places. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Scottish Recovery Network, a couple of reflections on the world we're in at the moment, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Making Recovery Real, which was a big initiative that did change the way we worked, and then also about what we've been doing recently to take that online and some of the lessons we've learned and the reflections we have for the future about how suitable that is for online. So to start off, Scottish Recovery Network, as Sandra said, we are an initiative, so we are located in the third sector, hosted by a larger organisation. We're funded by the Scottish Government and have been since 2004. We sort of have 3-year cycles, and at the moment we are about to embark on some negotiations as to where we go next, which is actually quite interesting given the timing. We have a vision of a Scotland where mental health recovery is real for everyone and lived experiences at the centre of our health and social care system. Over the 16 years we've been around, we've worked in lots of different ways, and I would say that co-production, while it had been part of the way we worked, was something that really challenged us. About 6 years ago, we developed the idea of making recovery real. And that was because we undertook a bit of an assessment as to where we were 10 years down the line. And we realised that in this 10 years, there had been lots of really good work. And in Scotland, recovery had moved from what was seen as the radical edge to more of the mainstream. There was lots of talk of recovery. But if I'm being very honest with you, there was not a lot of walking the recovery. So there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of change or action, particularly in the public mental health system in our National Health Service, the very beloved NHS. There was very little evidence of any change or any sort of move towards a more recovery-orientated way of working. We'd also been spending quite a lot of time working with NHS mental health services, and that while we'd met some fantastic people who really wanted to bring about change, nothing much was happening. And we realised that the way we were working with them was being driven by their culture rather than ours. So we knew that going forward we had to think about a different way of working, and we had to sort of step out of the system because the system was constraining what could happen. So I'm going to be as honest with you as I can, and I'm usually a fairly honest person. Loads of things don't work, and you learn from them. And also the meaningful engagement of people living with mental health problems and health and social service change is complex and it's challenging. My experience has been that those complexities and challenges are often within the system itself, rather than the people who want to engage, but are finding it difficult. And as a sort of an independent actor, Scottish Recovery Network has been able to play that facilitator, catalyst and bridge building role. So I've been with Scottish Recovery Network for just over 8 years in various roles. And Making Recovery was partly because I joined and I was very excited about my new role in a national organisation, and quickly found that I was pretty demoralised by the lack of change that we were seeing. And so I developed Making Recovery Real, and I was responsible for its implementation, and I've been very closely involved in one of the areas that it happened in Dundee. So before we go into Making Recovery Real, I think it's worthwhile just reflecting on where we are. COVID-19 is not just Scottish or UK. I mean, it's worldwide, and we're now, learning to live with rather than waiting for it to pass. As an organisation, we are very small, so there's 6 of us covering Scotland, and we're based all over the place and just come together for meetings. And actually, so online has been wonderful for us as a team. But we spent most of our time working with local partners, organisations, people with lived experience services, bringing people together in local areas, lots of face-to-face events, some small, some large, and it was all about a room and space and co-design and people thinking about what they wanted to do and helping them to do it. So March 2020 hit, and we just thought the bottom had fallen out of our world. And it was like, oh no, this is a massive problem. We can't bring people together. What we did was we very quickly decided that we needed to go online. None of us were entirely comfortable with it. A couple of the team were really, really uncomfortable with it. But we decided to do it quickly because we thought that the more we thought about it, the more problems we would come up with, and that we just had to do it and try and do it the best we could. And I'll go on to explain how we did that, because we built on what we'd learned from our face-to-face. But what we did find was that not everyone liked what we were doing, but the vast majority of people appreciated it. And so even if they weren't comfortable, we got quite a lot of our existing people who we networked with and came to our events coming online because they trusted us. And it was a good way for them to start exploring the online space. And many have gone on to, say, use online peer groups and things as a result, or to set them up. But we also found that we were reaching people we never could in face-to-face events. People who just couldn't get over their anxieties of walking into a room with lots of people. People who in many parts of Scotland live in quite rural areas and couldn't afford at the time to travel or the cost of travel. People with childcare, pressurised lives of jobs, childcare issues, who just found it very difficult to fit things into their work, into their working and their life. We also know digital exclusion is a major issue and a barrier, and we talk about it a lot in Scotland. I think we do like the negative stuff. We love exclusion. In the mid-90s, we talked about social exclusion all the time, and then somebody said we need to start talking about social inclusion. I'm not saying it's led to everything being really brilliant, but it was that change of mindset, is that you stop talking about why people are not part of things and you start saying, what are we doing to get them part of things, and what are we doing to help them come on board. So yes, there is people who have not had the technology or the money for the Wi-Fi or data. There is probably a larger group of people who are not comfortable with it. But what we've realised over the last 6 to 8 months is that staying connected is so fundamental to our well-being and to the way our society works. If we're going to have the communities that actually get us through this and create the society that we want to live in, we're going to have to be connected. So it's a human right, and therefore digital connection is a human right. So we can sort out the technology and we can work with people to help them get confident and comfortable using it. So we'll be pushing for digital inclusion to be a human right, as is inclusion in society a human right, and it's about people's ability to participate. We're also very aware that it's easy to say in-person good, online bad, but also that's partly because of the way we often use online in health, and it's very individual, so it's sort of almost like bot-like CBT, whereas we've seen a real flourishing of online peer support groups over the last 8 months. So we'd like to push the idea that you can have digital, you can use online in a way that connects people, builds relationships. Not saying it's easy, but it's possible. So a lot of our work is around trying to get people thinking about what recovery really means. So it's not just saying, oh, I'm really into recovery, that's great, we really do recovery. It's about, well, actually, what does that mean day to day, particularly in the services and supports that we offer to people, or that people access when they hit points in their life needing help. But I realised, and my colleagues realised, that it's quite easy for services to talk about recovery, but it is quite difficult for them to figure out what that means, because it's not a model, it's not pre-described, there's no procedure document, and our health services are very procedure orientated. It's about values, it's about relationships, so it's something that is quite difficult to categorise and regulate, but it's also about a way of working with people. So Making Recovery Real was about the idea that, Making Recovery Real was the idea that actually bringing people together in a different way, having different conversations, would lead to different results. So instead of, let's go to the mental health strategic planning group and we've got this rep for that and that representative for that, and we'll have an agenda and we'll talk about services, the existing services, and nothing changes. Is, well, actually, what do people want to see is happening for them in their area? So Making Recovery Real was about bringing people with lived experience, local services and organisations and decision makers together to explore what would make recovery real in their area and work together to make this happen. We worked with people and organisations in 2 areas. As a small organisation, we couldn't do this in every area, and we really wanted to try it out properly. We worked in Dundee, which is a small city in Scotland, third city in Scotland, and quite compact. It's a city with a long history of issues of deprivation, poverty, unemployment, mental health, and addiction issues. But it is also a city that's in a really exciting period of regeneration at the moment. And then the other area is Moray, which is in the northeast of Scotland on the North Sea coast. And it's a rural fishing town, small town area. So both are very different. One of the things I would say before I tell you a wee bit about Making Recovery Real is that we started in June 2015, and in both areas Making Recovery Real continues, but it's in local ownership, under local direction, and in both areas Making Recovery Real is now part of the mental health strategic planning system in those both areas. So something, if nothing else worked, something worked, that it is still bringing people together. So what were the key features? Because I think this is what's important for thinking about how you take things online. So the key features were, it was a really wide agenda. All we were interested in, it was about recovery, it was about lived experience being at the centre, and it was about collaboration. So co-production and action. We didn't know what the answers were going to be, or what the actions and solutions should be, but that was up to local people. And for me, one of the things I felt was very important as an organisation was moving away from being the experts in recovery to being facilitators, catalysts, and bridge builders, brokers. Is that we weren't the experts in recovery. People in those areas were the experts in what they needed for their area. But what we did have was the kudos of a national organisation, the ability to scan and look what is elsewhere, and also as I found, just to be that encouraging, motivating presence and to keep a project running, to build momentum so that local people got involved, got enthused and took it over. The other thing we did was we started with lived experience, not services. So we didn't say, let's try and change this service. We said, let's try and change what mental health is about in Dundee and Moray. So much bigger picture, overarching, not about any particular service. And in both areas, to start it off, we had events, big events, and we spent quite a bit of time, a few months, planning them with local organisations. And at those events, we didn't have speakers. We didn't have the high hegians, as we call them in Scotland, the sort of top bosses, coming and giving their thing. But we had events where local groups and organisations ran tasters and workshops. You know, so we did things like hula hooping for health, hope stone painting, willow weaving, well-being meditation sessions. And we did that for a couple of hours, and then in the afternoon we had a conversation cafe where people just talked about big, you know, how to make recovery real in their area. What was really interesting was it set that tone that lived experience was at the centre. This was about lived experience, and actually it wasn't at that point about bringing everyone together on an equal basis, because everything is so unequal. So in many ways what we were saying is it doesn't matter if the practitioners and the decision makers are uncomfortable, because they're going to have to get uncomfortable if things change. And that's one of my strong beliefs in co-production, is that you have to provide frameworks where sometimes us workers feel really uncomfortable, because nothing's going to happen unless we start to feel a bit uncomfortable. As I say, we used a conversation cafe approach, big broad questions, and as time went on we had a whole set of peers and local practitioners who trained as table hosts, so we had table discussions, and so there was so many people playing a role, welcoming people into events, bringing people from their homes to events, people who were anxious and that wanted to be involved. And we always resisted context setting. So I stopped using PowerPoint about 2015 and never really got back into it until recently for a couple of online things. But it was really important not to be telling people what they needed to know before we asked them what they wanted to happen. Having all these different events, we didn't just have conversation cafes, although we used that approach. So we have, you know, what's important to you events, what's going to make recovery real. Then we had planning events for particular activities. Then we had get involved events where people came along talking about how they'd like to be involved, and dropped in and filled out, you know, with us, chatted through, I want to do this, I want to do that, and this is the support I think I would need. And that really helped to cement a real core of about 40 people with lived experience who got involved in both areas. But these events helped to develop a new culture, and it helped to develop new relationships. And the first thing we saw was, not that it ended it, but more cooperation and collaboration and less competition between third sector organisations, but also more of an understanding between lived experience practitioners, and particularly local authority workers and community health professionals starting to get involved and starting to say things like, this is the best continuing professional development I've ever had. But, you know, really changing relationships. We didn't have committees and steering groups because nobody wanted to be on them. But what we did was we took all the activities and we made groups around them. So we had a recovery story collecting group, we had a recovery filmmaking group, we had a peer recovery network, peer-to-peer training groups, and we had a planning group for recovery celebration events, and people liked that. So to give you an idea of what it was like, so sometimes we had extremely big events, but what we always did was put people in smaller groups, because we found that they liked that, even if we encouraged people to move between groups in the day. We also celebrated people's achievements, so we would have award ceremonies at events, and we also did some fun things like singing and dancing, and, you know, paper drawing and painting and things as well, and painting as well as having chats about what was important and what needed to happen. And sometimes we found that combining a more artistic, creative approach with, say, a co-design event was where it worked best. So basically, in both areas, what was asked for, which was much more of a recovery focus, recovery story sharing and peer support, is now in local strategic and mental health plans, and has really been taken up by the health and social care partnerships in those areas, which are the integrated bodies driving things. That's led to increased funding for things like peer support training and peer support workers. There is definitely a strengthened role of lived experience. and an acknowledgement it can't just be service user involvement, but lived experience engagement. And there has been a lot more investment in the infrastructure that goes around to help make that happen as a long-term thing. So participation and involvement in local organisations, and funding to bring together the peer recovery network. There is more collaboration locally between organisations, and what people are seeing is that if they collaborate and they become part of things, they actually get more opportunities, not just funding, but opportunities to get involved in bigger initiatives. Making Recovery Real started at the big picture or strategic level, but that's not to say it stopped there. So almost all of the organisations involved, and there's 12 partners, have made changes. For some of them, that has been moving away from staff running groups to people with lived experience running their own groups, so becoming much more peer orientated. There's been a significant increase in the number of peer, volunteer and paid peer worker roles. And there has continued to be training for people and opportunities to share recovery stories with the wider community. And in both areas, it has led to new thinking, and people involved have been able to put into new thinking around different types of services, particularly the sort of services that people can engage with without being eligible or being referred, where they can go to get help when they need it and get help to find what will support them. So I think it's far from perfect. There is a lot still to happen, but it's getting there. I think starting at that big picture made a real difference, and it influenced the agenda, and I think it really gave people a lot of confidence. We also focused on those who wanted to be part of it, while keeping an eye and welcoming arms for those who were not yet ready to engage, on the basis that they would come on board one day. One of the main issues, and you'll have picked up, is that our health and social care system is officially integrated in Scotland, but actually there's quite big divisions between health and social care, and engaging our colleagues in the National Health Service was particularly problematic at times. We didn't stop and wait for them, we just kept going, but we just kept the door open and kept sending them information, kept inviting them to things, and in time they did engage far more. And that has been an interesting process that is still ongoing. I think getting involved in projects and activities like recovery story sharing and peer support felt quite exciting, and we kept the momentum up, and people felt as if they were in charge of making some things happen, and I think they felt more like in charge, more in control, and less pawns in the system. And that was workers as well as people with lived experience, and I think that's helped keep it going because people feel this sense of purpose. And linked to that, a lot of people with lived experience who were involved told us they got so much from it, opportunities, but also it really helped their recovery. Some people got work, out of it, and workers all speak of a renewed passion for what they're doing, enjoying what they're doing, feeling more part of a coalition for change. So we were doing all this, really enjoying it, taking it to other areas, and then lockdown hit. And we thought, so we've learned all this about how you bring people together and what you do and what's possible and where to start. So let's do it. So what we decided to do was, at that point, many of our current and potential partners were diverted into supporting people directly as a result of COVID, and lots of services disappeared, particularly public sector services, and the third sector services were scrambling around trying to reshape. So we thought we'll do this ourselves, and hopefully take people with us over time. And we advertised a programme of 6 conversation cafes, and we said that there would be bringing people together online but from similar areas. And what we wanted to do was have that lived experience voice coming out during COVID, so that it would influence how we were thinking about the future. We thought back to making recovery real in other areas and experience in other areas, and we realised that when COVID hit, it was all about, and I'm nothing against the experts, but it was all about the experts, but the experts were all medical experts, and we weren't hearing from experts by experience to the same extent, particularly in mental health. So we thought this is an opportunity for us to bring people together, but also with the point of influencing the agenda. So we said, let's do 6 cafes, and the spaces went in about half an hour, which was a wee bit shocking to us, because as a small team we're saying, oh no, what will we do? So we then announced another 6. We ran 12 cafes over the summer. What was very interesting, as you can see from the cafes, was how many different people got together. So what we managed to attract was frontline practitioners, people with lived experience, and some maybe more strategic decision makers, but particularly people with lived experience, frontline decision makers. We decided that to think about what really works. So as I say, let's start with that big picture and try and influence the agenda and get the voice of lived experience there. But we also thought what works really well for people is the idea of sitting at a table and having a discussion. So we limited the numbers in each cafe so people had that feeling that they were sitting around a table. We also understood that this would be uncomfortable because we ran our first cafes in May and a lot of people weren't used to this. So we did a welcome pack that went out to everybody who expressed an interest and registered, which had lots of information about Zoom, which we used, but also information about sort of ground, good conversation, hints, what they could expect in a cafe. And it was all done in a really, bright and interested and happy type of approach. We also, with everything at the end of everything said, so grab a cuppa, come and join us and have a blether, which is a good Scottish word for having a good discussion. And people like that. So we built on the idea of our events were known for feeling friendly and informal, but they're underpinned by a strong structure and facilitation. So for each of the cafes, we had a nice wee connecting up exercise based on personal well-being and 3 very broad questions. What's keeping you well? What's out there in the community that's really helping you? And how do you think mental health and well-being should be managed in the future? What's the opportunities? What we found was that after the first 5 or 10 minutes, people loved it. We've had lots of people asking when we're running more, and what we've done is support them to get their own going in their own areas. And more organisations are moving to this, and we've been able to play a role, and we're developing a digital conversation cafe pack for people. We developed 2 reports coming out of it. One around the whole issue around staying connected, and we talked about the insights and inspirations. We talked about what people were doing to stay well, and that staying connected was really important, and how they were doing that, and how people were managing to stay well. And really focusing on the fact that many people with lived experience were saying, actually we have skills to offer, and that needs to be tapped into. This is not all about people going to their doctor because they're struggling. This is normal. We're all struggling, but there's things you can do, and we have a role to play. And that actually was very well received, and people are interested, I can send links to it, because our website's good, but it's not easy to find stuff sometimes. We also developed a podcast which has gone down really well for people listening to what people said, and we did a short animation about staying connected that has been played lots of times. And then we put out a second report which went tapped into the Build Back Better and the idea that recovery has quite a lot to offer us. As we go back, we've had a lot of retweeting, a lot of sharing, a lot of recognition of this, and we've been asked to do lots of articles and blogs and third sector and health and social care newsletters. So it has been really a really important way to get the message out of recovery and lived experience. So just before I end, I'm going to share with you the second animation we did. It's just about a minute, and it gives you an idea of some of what we've been sharing.
Scottish Recovery Network. Build Back Better. At our online conversation cafes, people told us a mental health recovery mindset was helping them to navigate COVID-19. Seeing it as a journey with ups and downs, focusing on what they can do, not what they can't. engaging with peer support and sharing experiences, using recovery approaches and skills to help others. As we plan for the future, we need to build on what we have learned from lockdown, reflect on what is important to people: peer support, lived experience, community. We need to be courageous and recognise where change can be empowering. Most of all, we need to put lived experience at the heart of mental health support. Scottish Recovery Network, www.scottishrecovery.net.
Mm. Oh, so that's just a sort of a short tour as to how we've taken our approach. And oh, I'm sorry about this. It's meant to go to the next. I can't make it go to my next slide. So anyway, which was all our details. I'll get it back to you in a minute. So that's an idea of where we were. We've, I think, in some ways started a process where we can deliver some of our work online. We can support other people to engage online, to start influencing the agenda. And next stage for us is to look at how we take this to much more sort of detailed co-design work around particular projects or initiatives, particularly as public sector staff start to come back online. But we know we are going to continue with a blended approach. It makes sense, it helps us reach more people. And one of the things we have noticed is we are reaching more of the decision makers using this. And for us, while it's important to reach out to people with lived experience, that is a good way to bring them together. We're also going to promote that other people use this along with face-to-face approaches once we're allowed back out again and to do that. So for us, co-production or co-design is not necessarily just about specific services, it's about changing that agenda and informing that agenda, and that can actually lead to great changes at at service level, because the strategic framework has changed and the way of thinking, not just about recovery for us, but actually about the role of people with lived experience and mental health problems, is that they are not problems, they are not the people to be solved, they are part of the solution. So I think our final message is that what is most important is that lived experience becomes a much more integral part of our day-to-day health and social care services and system. And if we have to adapt the way we work to help make this happen, we're going to do it. Change isn't always comfortable, but as we said there, it can be empowering. Thank you.
I want to clap here. Where's my online clap? It's not the same, but
thank you. That's what's nice about Zoom now.
So many things in what you have said. We will go to the Google Doc, but I may just open the floor now for questions or comments that people might have for Louise about the work that they're doing. And feel free to unmute or put up your hand.
I would also be really interested to hear about work that you're doing, because just because I think in a way it's, for me, part of being involved in things like this is it's lovely to share what we're doing, but I really love to hear what other people are doing as well.
Yes. Gillian, do you want to ask your question in person?
Sure, if you give me a minute to find my unmute button. Hi, Louise, great to see you. You know, I loved your presentation. I love all the themes that are coming out. And this question isn't so much about how do you do co-design online, but, you know, ironically, I was just at a meeting where a local surgeon was saying, you know, here at McMaster, oh, Jillian, this work that you're doing sounds really great around co-design, co-production, and mental health, but we could really benefit from that. What are the lessons learned you can give us around how to help people or help with dealing with people with mental illness in a hospital, because it's really a problem for us. Just what you're saying, people aren't the problem, and yet here's a lens that's still saying people are the problem. So what could we do in a hospital setting to either use co-design or co-production to begin to shift those attitudes? Any thoughts on that?
Well, we did do a piece of work in Dundee with what are called mental health social workers. And they're people who get involved with people who are subject to compulsory treatment, so who are forced into hospital or forced medication, which is not particularly recovery orientated. And they're a nice bunch of social workers, and they were pretty unhappy with the way things were going. One of the things we did say was that actually those people at that time are in crisis, and co-production is not for them, right? And I think one of the problems with NHS services is they are absolutely terrified of people who are not their patients, because they don't own them and they have no control. So what we said is we will reach out through our Making Recovery Real networks to people who have had experience of compulsory treatment. And we will bring them together with you, and we will be that independent broker to talk about what worked, what just felt not great, but what they felt would make it better, because they say we know what we're doing is not good, but we don't know how to make it better. So we actually managed to attract quite a wide range of people, including somebody who was in a rehabilitation ward but was now allowed out in day release. And she was very condemning of the whole system, actually. But we had people who had maybe experienced compulsory treatment 3-4 years ago, or who had a family member who came and brought really valid points. And I think that distance from it also helped them to really be able to go from going, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, to this what would have made it better at this point, this is what would have made it better at that point. And so we use a very appreciative inquiry approach. So we never start with what's wrong, because you know what, folk tell you what's wrong. Always start with, was there anything that worked for you? What would have made that better? And you find out what's wrong. So we would say is that the issue is with particularly medical and nursing staff, who I think have real issues with power. And the thing about co-production is you need to give up the power, which means you need to give up power to people with lived experience, which means local organisations who work with lived experience. And that means people who are not your current service users or patients, but who have experiences that can help you find a way through that. And that's the approach we take.
Okay, thank you very much. It's very helpful.
I feel like, Alexis, your question is kind of a follow-up to that. And Jan William, I do see your question about impact, but maybe I'll move to Alexis first, and then we'll come back to evaluation in a moment.
Thanks, Sandra. That was a really great presentation, Louise, very clear. It sounds like a really awesome initiative, and kudos to continuing that work in this online setting. One thing that I was wondering about, I'm working on another project in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Kenya, thinking about equity and human rights in community-based mental health services. And we were talking about recovery from the perspective of people recovering not from their mental illness or their label or the disorder that they've been given, but their recovery from the psychiatric experience and the institutionalization that they might have gone through and so on. So I'm wondering how your initiative works to facilitate critical thinking around the mental health system and recovery from what they might have experienced and getting support, so to speak. So it sounds like you kind of alluded to that. I'm just wondering if you could expand.
It's something that we're doing, and we are planning to do much more. I mentioned that we are currently in a situation where we have funding till March 2021, and we are engaged in a massive online engagement program at the moment, which has been very interesting because people are wanting to start that conversation. I think that's a conversation that's been quite hard to have in Scotland. The medical model is still dominant. The Scottish NHS is quite different from that in England now. We've not gone through much change. So a lot of people think that's great. I'm not so sure. Scotland has got is going its own way in health and social care. There's been a lot of change in social care, but less in health. I think there's real issues, and we're going to have to get to the nub of it with the medical model, not only in the way that we are in danger of pathologising natural human feelings and emotions on a mass scale due to COVID-19. We already do it. We already have pathologised grief, bereavement, all sorts of things. And also in Scotland, I would say that we are still at the very early stages of understanding trauma in our mental health system is not trauma informed at all. We're having very high numbers of young people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and things like that, which is devastating for them and is probably not a particularly helpful diagnosis for many people because it doesn't seem to lead anywhere for them. So I think you're right. Also, we have this big focus on stigma in Scotland. I think that's because it's easy, because it's almost like the establishment saying, oh, it's all you bad people out in the community. Yous aren't very nice to people with mental health problems. But when you talk to people, their experiences of the medicalised psychiatric system are where they experience discrimination, stigma and traumatic experiences, largely not in the community. So it's something that I've just been acting director. As you can tell, we're in a bit of flux. I've been acting director since February. We've lost 3 members of staff due to ill health and can't recruit because of COVID and everything. One of the things that I wanted to do was find a way to be more bold about what we're saying and to have strong, clear, simple messages. And I think for us is that we need to move to a social model of mental health that actually understands that pathologising individuals does not take account of the role that society plays and the role that society plays in people's problems, but the role that society could play in people's recovery. So yeah, we're looking at and we're drawing inspiration from organisations across the world for that, looking at things that are coming out parts of Europe, Australia. So you know, it'd be great to link in with people on that.
Such a powerful message. I'm going to have you, William, you asked about evaluation, which I feel like could be its own thing. So maybe we have a future session on that. I don't know if you want to touch, Louise, on the evaluation, and then I'm going to move us to the Google Jamboard.
What I will do is I will send Sandra an email with lots of links so you can get directly to our stuff. We did a review of Making Recovery Real. And there's some reports and a film. We've recognised that the way we work isn't particularly easy to evaluate, but that we don't mean that it can't happen. So one of our plans, and at the moment I'm working with a group to secure us basically an embedded researcher and academic partner for the 3 years from March 2021, so that we can actually look at what impact we're having and how the way we work contributes to that impact, so that by 2023, 24, we feel much more confident about knowing. So when I say this is what seems to work well, it's what people have told me and what I've noticed, but it would be really good to have that more formally evaluated. As a small organisation, we just didn't have funds the last 3 years for evaluation, but what we're doing this time is putting aside funds to make it happen.
Thank you. So we will post and share links after we have everyone that's registered, so we will do that. Sorry, I have too many screens open here. Emma, can you share the Google Jamboard? I'm just going to highlight some of the things. Thank you to those of you who have posted here. When we start to look at some of the opportunities and the challenges, I feel like there's a bit of a yin and yang happening here, but there are definitely opportunities that I think you alluded to, right? Around this new online world that we're thrust into, that maybe have to do with being wider reaching, so people can join in from a distance. We can connect people with various communication abilities using technology. Knowledge mobilization could be wider reaching. This idea of synchronous and asynchronous conversations and how that can be convenient and efficient, potentially meaningful. So again, there's tools that we can use with technology, breakout rooms to allow for engagement and talking time, opportunity for connection in a time of increased isolation. It gives us something. Maybe some things around accessibility, so options for anonymous participation. Certainly some practical things around saving time and money from not having to travel or rent space, so we can use resources in other areas. Access to people at home, so people don't have to find their way somewhere. A safe space to leave if feeling uncomfortable, and breaking down informal barriers. We're all in our home spaces. So maybe there's relatability. So again, lots of potential opportunities. I think, Emma, if you can make the screen a little bit bigger, and then there's some barriers as well. So I'm just going to read through them for now, and then invite people to speak about them. So barriers certainly around technology. So connectivity not being good or available, technology challenges. Does everyone have access to the internet and to devices, especially people in remote communities? And so again, technology can be a facilitator, but also a barrier. People who were living with low income, limited access to tech or the environment, combining different tech access methods. So can we try call in and online, and can we engage people on the phone and not just internet? Some comments here about what do we lose when we're not in person? So again, that community buzz or connection. We don't have body language. Is the energy the same? You miss that buzz in the room. How do you, facilitate that turn taking? Is there opportunity for informal chit chat? It becomes this very formal thing. And the before and after chatting, it's harder to build relationships. People who hide behind their screens. The online virtual environment is different. So no snacks, too many screens, too much sitting, sometimes difficult to slow the pace as well. And so how do you maintain momentum and continuity? How do we do arts-based creative co-design virtually? And then some other around time, resources, funding, feeling stretched or at capacity, given the current context. How do we level the playing field around power differences and imbalances? How conducive is online engagement for Indigenous practices? How do you do ceremony, for example? Trust takes time, particularly in the absence of informal connection, to help build relationships. Sorry, so those are a few. I'm going to stop and have people maybe make some comments or thoughts. Louise, you may have some thoughts as well. And Emma, we can stop sharing the screen. We will circulate this as well, but if people have some comments that they want to maybe add a little bit to what they posted or have some questions.
Louise, this is Regina from Vancouver. I've followed your work for years. I had no idea you're such a small team. So
Yes.
I'm shocked actually. So thank you for all your contributions. I do a little bit of teaching and I use your work a lot. So thank you so much. Wonderful contribution. Thank you.
I was just going to say something very quickly about somebody saying the chat before and after. So that's something that we've noticed, and it's also something that I've had to make some of my team do, is that we always used to go and set up events early and allow people to come along and chat and have cups of tea and say, and actually I would say, well, if you're here, could you put pens in all those tables or that? And I then found, particularly in Dundee, I would arrive and folk would be waiting. So what we have done with, not with our engagement events because they're a wee bit different, but with the conversation cafes, we opened the cafe 15 minutes before. And while we used a waiting room, we let folk in. So if somebody was there early, we knew that they're a bit anxious. So we'd say, have you got a cup of tea? No, we'll go and get one, I'll be here. And I just made sure that one of us was at the screen, just saying, oh, who are you? What are you doing? How are things? So we did do that. It is quite tiring and it is quite hard, but it seems to have worked wonders because there's a couple of people who we'd never engaged with before who've come back, come to our engagement and now communicate with us. So, and some of them have actually turned out to be quite important one of them being a strategic commissioner from Glasgow City Council, who was very nervous about the whole thing. So I think it's worthwhile thinking about the sort of things you do in person. You need to find a way to replicate them online.
Can I say something about the barriers? About the for first, I must say I'm really glad to be here, and I heard your presentation. It's very great and useful for me. And I wanna say about one barrier in an online conversation. I think one of the big importance in conversation is eye contact. And I think in the online conversation, it's a decrease, and we couldn't have a good eye contact. And I think it's one of the barriers in online conversation. That's it.
Thanks, Samira. Louise, did you want to comment on that, or I guess just a nod?
That's why we limited the number on screen. So we had 8 people at a cafe, and the bigger on screen.
Sorry, Carrie, we'll squeeze in your comment and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you, Louise, for a really informative talk. I'm Carrie Hand from London, Ontario in Canada. And I just want to follow up on the question or the comment that you made about engaging people in informal chit chat just before the meeting starts. And I've done that in some of the meetings where I'm having, some of my Zoom meetings. And it works really well when there's a few people on and I'm either getting to know new people or have a previous relationship. And then I find as more people come, everybody clams up. Have you found any way around that?
Well, we talk about the weather. We ask people what biscuits they're having with their cup of tea, whether they're having tea or coffee, really stupid things. And what we don't ask people is where they work, but we say, oh, where are you joining from today? A bit like, oh, I'm from here, I'm from there. But I do think that we have learned something about maximum numbers. I mean, I think this has worked really well, but to get that conversation which actually starts to flow between people, not through a facilitator, you can't really have more than 8 people involved. Yeah, we just, and I can talk for Scotland, as they say, I could talk to anyone about anything. So and a couple of my colleagues are the same. So we see it as not like to talk over, but I think it's more a case of if somebody's a bit nervous, say, oh, have you got a cup of tea? How do you take your tea? Have you got a biscuit? And they loosen up.
So can I go ahead, Sandra? If there's other questions that come up, we're going to be sharing materials in the Google Jamboard, and we'll also share momentarily a link to our Co-Design Hub website so that if you'd like to continue the conversation, there will be avenues to do so. But I wanted to make sure we had enough time here to thank you, Louise, for an absolutely inspiring presentation. I think, at least for me, I could really feel the warmth that the people that you work with must also feel when you describe this welcoming atmosphere. I just wanted to come join with my cup of tea, not to mention the sustainability and the very important need for the projects that you've created, and really, I think, disrupting and dismantling some of the traditional ways of doing things and allowing people that should maybe lean into that discomfort and learn some new ways that better serve the community. So thank you on behalf of everybody who's joined today. I do see more questions coming, so we will be sure to share some ways to continue the conversation via our Co-Design Hub website. Also, I would like to share just some further opportunities with the group. One is for us to continue learning ourselves about the speaker series and the needs of this community. One of the benefits to being online is we could offer this learning opportunity to a much broader community than we've been able to in the past. So thank you to everybody who's joined, especially those who are joining from afar. It was really wonderful to see so many faces. We would like to keep offering these sessions. We try to do them about monthly. As you know, things are a little bit sideways right now with COVID, but we will be sharing any news about upcoming speaker series on our website. So let me share right now in the link in the chat. The first link is to the speaker series feedback, and that will allow you to give us some feedback about today's session, as well as let us know if you'd like to be a part of our mailing list so that you get regular updates about what's going on with the Hub. If you have a request for further information or sessions, you're welcome to add it in that feedback, and we'll consider that when doing some planning moving forward. If you'd like for us not to reach out to you, but you want to reach out to us, we always have news from the Hub coming up on our website. So that's the second link you'll see there. And one thing I wanted to flag for any students at McMaster undergraduate or graduate is we have an open grant opportunity for people who are doing co-design work with respect to vulnerable populations in health and social services. So that grant opportunity is open until November 12th. And that final link that I just posted will take you to the application materials. So with all of that information, we'll leave the chat up for a minute, but Louise, again, thank you very, very much. I can tell just from the Google chat and our live discussion here how inspiring and thought-provoking your talk was for the group we have gathered.
Thank you. It's been a lovely way to end a Friday afternoon.
Indeed.
And thank you. And I will send Sandra an email, and please, anyone who wants to connect with us, we've got a great wee newsletter, which is short, but we keep you up to date. And if any of you have projects you think we would be interested in, please send me information.
Thank you.
Thanks to all for your participation, and we'll see you again.
Yeah, thank you.